Member for Melton.
Thanks, Acting Speaker, and I rise to contribute to the Justice Legislation Amendment, the Vicarious Liability for Child Abuse Bill 2025. And I just want to acknowledge and commend the member for Point Cook's contribution. And there's been many great contributions today from all sides of the chamber, and I think that's a credit to what Parliament is all about. And there should be no politics played on legislation like this. So I commend every member that's spoken on this bill and the others that wanted to speak on the bill but haven't been able to. Of course, survivors deserve more than just recognition. They deserve justice, protection, and a system that truly listens and learns from their experiences, and that exactly what this bill is delivering for them. And I want to acknowledge all the victim survivors for all of their courage, for their persistence in making sure we get this bill up, and it is amazing. And all the support from all the agencies that have supported and pushed this particular issue. It's been amazing, and being involved in the meeting that we had in the party room only a few months ago, as other members have said, it really brought it home, and that's why it's important that we carry this bill. Acting Speaker, it's rare in this place that we get such a literal description of what we're doing, but today we're righting some wrongs, and specifically the Wrongs Act of 1958. And I want to thank the Attorney-General and all of her team for doing amazing work and hard work to ensure that no Victorian falls through what I personally think is an egregious loophole. One that I'm incredibly pleased just to stand up here and be able to contribute to close that loophole by passing this bill. I also want to acknowledge the member for Frankston and his great efforts. And I know many members have acknowledged the member for Frankston, but his tireless efforts and work on this has been absolutely amazing, and his leadership on it has been just incredible. And it just goes to show what a special person he is, and well done to the member for Frankston, so thank you. But I also want to acknowledge the member for Brighton and his contribution, and his passionate contribution and emotional contribution. I think it was fantastic, and it certainly led the way from the opposition, and all of the opposition contributions have been very good, and everyone that's contributed has been excellent. And of course, it was just over a year ago that we saw the High Court of Australia in its ruling of Bird versus DP, removing vicarious liability from responsible institutions. And in doing this, it's provided the opportunity for institutions and organisations to avoid responsibility to survivors, to claimants, and seeking to hold accountable offending volunteers or contractors. Vicarious liability is a concept where we see it deployed in daily in our daily lives. If a volunteer injures himself while volunteering for an organisation, they are rightly covered by that organisation's duty of care to seek compensation for an associated injury or damages. If you fall over and break your leg, you will be covered, and rightly so. But Acting Speaker, it stands to reason that if a volunteer injures or does harm to someone else while undertaking those same responsibilities, that organisation has a duty of care to compensate those harm under their auspice. Clearly the Catholic Church of the diocese didn't see this. Organisations have a vicarious liability to ensure that a person working on behalf of that organisation is of sufficient character to safely do so, and does not present a risk or danger to those that they interact with. And again, clearly the Archdiocese of Ballarat didn't see it that way, they didn't view it that way. I'd certainly like to note that Bird versus DP, the chain of events as it played out in the Victorian courts, and DP, a pseudonym, commenced civil proceedings in the Supreme Court of Victoria against the current Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Ballarat, Paul Bird. Bishop Bird was the nominated defendant pursuant to the legal identity of defendants, Organisational Child Abuse Act 2018. Of course, in 1971, at the age of 5, DP was sexually abused at his parents' home in Port Fairy on 2 separate occasions by Father Brian Coffey. He's now deceased, an assistant priest from St Patrick's local parish church. And in December 2021, the Supreme Court found the diocese vicariously liable for the sexual abuse perpetrated by Father Coffey, notwithstanding a finding that Coffey was not an employee of the diocese. As Coffey wasn't akin to an employee, this was held to be sufficient to establish Limb 1 of the vicarious liability. Then in 2023, on appeal, the Victorian Court of Appeal upheld the Supreme Court's decision that found the diocese vicariously liable for the sexual abuse of DP by an assistant priest. That decision was later appealed by the diocese and overturned by the High Court in November 2024. So, of course, that just shows that it just looks like an institution is just so desperate not to accept responsibility for the crimes committed by their volunteers and litigious enough to pursue victim survivors through every level of justice to deny them justice. Institutions such as these have the privilege of thinking in the millennia and waiting it out, and that's what they do. They go to every level to, pursue, I suppose, pursue what they might believe of their rights and their innocence in regard to the actions that have been caused. Of course, the devastating effects organisations enable and hid perpetrators. They just hid them. They just moved them around, knowing that they were perpetrators. And as I say, when they were caught, they take it through every level of the judicial process. It's okay to have deep pockets, and an agency like the Ballarat Diocese did have deep pockets, and they just wear people down, and it's just disgraceful. And we've heard some of those examples, and we heard the example from the member for Point Cook in regard to the victim survivor that he spoke about. But importantly, in making their ruling, the High Court clearly carved out a position for the states and territories to urgently legislate a remedy for the gap identified with their interpretation, essentially inviting each jurisdiction in Australia to do just that. So survivors need governments across Australia to step up and legislate vicarious responsibility laws for sexual abuse committed, and to assign responsibility to the organisation that housed the offender. And that's exactly what our Attorney-General is doing here today by bringing this legislation forward and by everyone contributing today. So Victoria continues to lead the states in survivor protections, and this amendment resolves the issue identified by the High Court, and it ensures that the loophole that we've already seen exploited around the country is slammed shut, and that is a great thing. Of course, the ACT recently passed retrospective legislation which operates very similarly to what this bill will do. This legislation ensures that the responsible institutions, not the taxpayer, are ultimately responsible for compensating survivors. And of course, there are people on the public record suggesting that this sort of legislation would put too great a burden on local clubs, schools and the like. This is an entirely disingenuous argument, and it ignores the fact that organisations have a basic responsibility to ensure that the people partaking in their services are safe from the individuals employed by the organisation, that's volunteers or otherwise, who carry out these services. If a community or clerical organisation cannot responsibly guarantee safe services for our children in regard to the volunteers, contractors they oversee, they have absolutely no business providing those services. But they did, and they continue to hide it and continued to move them around. Of course, last week we saw an ABC News article in which the Anglican Diocese of Ballarat outlined its financial challenges and the need to sell properties due to abuse-related civil and redress claims. And I say to the Anglican Diocese of Ballarat, go right ahead, sell your properties, but do justice to the victim survivors. And this is the problem that the diocese has put up with for many, many years. Again, they just hide it. They have deep pockets, they wear people down, they throw a lot of money at legal cases that should never ever have happened, and they'll go to every avenue to cause trauma and torment to victim survivors. So I say, sell all your properties in Ballarat. I live in Ballarat. Sell your properties. We don't need them, but look after victim survivors. This is an amazing bill. I commend the Attorney-General, and I'm so pleased to be talking about this bill, and I commend it to the House.